This tank never lost a single duel. It was feared so much that just hearing the word "Tiger" over the radio made entire Allied battalions turn around and retreat without firing a single shot. But guess what killed almost all of these machines? It wasn't artillery, it wasn't airstrikes, and it wasn't enemy tanks. They were killed by the road. Empty fuel tanks, deep mud, and orders to abandon and burn them. Germany built 1,355 Tigers, and the vast majority of them were destroyed by their own crews. Here is how it happened. June 22nd, 1941. At dawn, 3 million Wehrmacht soldiers crossed the Soviet border. The German tank crews rolled into this war feeling utterly invincible, and you can understand why. Behind them was Poland, crushed in 27 days, and France, which surrendered in just 6 weeks. The Panzer IIIs and IVs had proven their absolute superiority. The Blitzkrieg was playing out like sheet music. The enemy was turned into crowds of refugees faster than they could organize any real defense. The first few days of Operation Barbarossa only fueled this supreme confidence. Tank wedges ripped open Soviet defenses, encircled entire armies, and swallowed hundreds of kilometers of territory. It seemed like in just one more month, it would all be over. And then came July. On the dirt roads of Ukraine and in the swamps near Leningrad, the Germans started running into something entirely unknown. Out of the forests rolled Soviet T-34s, driving straight at them without slowing down, even under heavy fire. German 37mm anti-tank guns just scratched their sloped armor. Shells bounced and ricocheted into the dirt. In return, Soviet 76mm guns punched clean through German armor, turning crews to ash. The heavy KV-1 tanks were even more terrifying. These were 45-ton monsters, armored so heavily that German shells didn't even leave a dent. In late June, one single KV tank in the Baltics blocked a road and held up an entire German division for over 24 hours. The Germans called in airstrikes, brought up heavy artillery, and attacked again and again. The KV just stood there, only retreating under its own power when it had fired its very last shell. Erwin Arders, a lead designer at the Henschel company, summed up that era in one sentence. When it became clear that Soviet tanks were superior to everything the German army had, it caused absolute panic. But German high command had smelled trouble even before the invasion. On May 26, 1941, 3 weeks before Barbarossa began, the Henschel and Porsche companies received an urgent order: design a fundamentally new heavy tank. The requirements were impossibly strict. It needed armor that could withstand any known anti-tank shell. It needed a gun that could pierce any enemy armor at maximum distance. The weight limit was 45 tons, and a working prototype had to be ready by April of the following year. In less than a year, German industry had to create something that simply did not exist anywhere else in the world. 2 design bureaus got the exact same assignment and came up with diametrically opposed solutions. Erwin Arders of Henschel chose a safe, proven path. He scaled up the Panzer IV design, maximized the armor, installed a massive Maybach engine, and used a standard mechanical transmission. It was a conservative, yet realistic approach. Ferdinand Porsche opted for a revolutionary design. His prototype featured a hybrid electric powertrain. 2 massive gasoline engines drove generators, which in turn powered electric motors on each track. There were no gearboxes and no complex drive shafts. A brilliant engineering solution. There was just one huge problem. Porsche's system required a colossal amount of copper for wiring and coils. In 1942, however, copper was a critically scarce strategic material in Germany, essential for munitions and radio communications. April 20th, 1942. Germany was celebrating Hitler's 53rd birthday. That very day, both prototypes were unloaded from rail cars just a few kilometers from the Führer's headquarters in Rastenburg. They had to travel only 11 kilometers along a paved road to the demonstration site, yet both tanks broke down en route. Porsche's tank overheated twice, forcing stops to let the electric motors cool down. The Henschel tank suffered a transmission jam, requiring engineers to make repairs right on the roadside. By the time the vehicles finally reached headquarters, Hitler had been waiting for hours and made no secret of his irritation. The outcome seemed a foregone conclusion. Porsche had known the Führer personally since the 1930s. His prototype received a long, fascinated look, and Hitler listened intently as the advantages of the electric drive were explained. And what of the Henschel vehicle? It had received only a few minutes of his attention, but field trials set the record straight. The Porsche prototype proved to be a copper-guzzling liability. Its electric transmission overheated at maximum power. It was less maneuverable and required highly skilled electricians for maintenance, rather than the standard tank mechanics who were already in short supply in the army. By June, the commission had ruled in favor of Henschel. Porsche, fully confident of victory thanks to his long-standing friendship with Hitler, had already built 100 hulls for his tank. Unwilling to scrap the chassis, the Germans converted them into heavy, turretless tank destroyers by mounting a massive gun in a fixed casemate. They named the vehicle after its creator, the Ferdinand, and therein lies the great irony. The name for the winning tank, Tiger, had actually been coined by Porsche himself. That name stuck forever, even though its creator had lost the competition. The first production Tigers rolled off the Henschel assembly line in August 1942. Weight, 57 tons. Armor, frontal armor as thick as a man's hand. Side armor capable of taking a direct hit from standard Allied anti-tank guns. The gun, an adapted 88mm anti-aircraft gun that Allied infantry had already learned to fear. It could punch through a T-34 from over a kilometer away. British Churchills and American Shermans didn't stand a chance, even from a mile out. The Tiger killed enemy tanks long before they could even get close enough to fire back. Its baptism by fire happened in December 1942 in Tunisia. Near Tabourba, 3 Tigers emerged blindly from an olive grove directly into a British position. The British fired first. 8 75mm shells slammed into the side of the lead Tiger. All 8 ricocheted. The armor held. In response, the Tiger calmly picked off the British tanks one by one. That day, the Germans realized they were practically invulnerable. But something proved even stronger than their armor: fear. Soon, the Allies started calling any dangerous German tank a Tiger. The legend grew faster than the production lines, and by the spring of 1943, a single Tiger could stall an entire brigade's advance without firing a shot. But back in the summer of 1942, the Tiger wasn't actually ready for war. The transmission would lock up from the immense weight. The engine choked on long marches, and the tracks jammed constantly. The engineers begged for another 6 months to perfect it. General Heinz Guderian strongly opposed rushing it into combat. Deploying a raw, untested machine in a secondary sector would waste the element of surprise and give the enemy time to study its weaknesses. But Hitler didn't know how to wait. September 1942, 4 Tigers were sent to the front lines near Leningrad, navigating through swamps and muddy dirt roads that were never meant for a 57-ton beast. 3 broke down before even reaching their positions. The 4th finally crawled to the front, tried to turn around in the soft mud, and sank hopelessly. The crew was ordered to abandon it. They didn't even have time to destroy it properly. A few days later, Soviet combat engineers reached it. They found a nearly intact machine, complete with documentation, ammunition, and fully functioning equipment. The secret of Germany's superweapon had been handed over on a silver platter, 6 months before the Tiger could show its true potential. Despite the blunder, the die was cast. The Tiger became the ultimate symbol of German technological supremacy, a machine meant to prove that one German tank was worth 10 enemy tanks. Price didn't matter, and the price was astronomical. 250,000 Reichsmarks for a single Tiger. For that money, you could build 3 Panzer IVs or 4 Stug 3s assault guns, vehicles that were proving wildly effective on every front. German industry simply couldn't stamp out tanks by the thousands. Every Tiger required months of labor from highly skilled specialists, scarce materials, and incredibly complex assembly. But High Command had made their choice: quality over quantity, technological supremacy over mass production. By the summer of 1943, the Tiger finally learned how to win. At the Battle of Kursk, about 150 Tigers spearheaded the last major German offensive in the east. The operation was a strategic failure, but the Tigers themselves were terrifying. In one single engagement, 15 Tigers destroyed over 100 Soviet tanks without losing a single machine. The standard T-34s were helpless. Their guns couldn't pierce the Tiger's frontal armor, even at point-blank range. Soviet crews had to completely change their tactics, attack from the sides, hunt for weak spots, or sacrifice several tanks just to draw the Tiger's fire while others flanked it. The new Soviet doctrine became, if you meet a Tiger, hit it with absolutely everything you have. Not to pierce the armor, but to break it. Blow off a track, jam the turret, shatter the optics, turn an invulnerable machine into a blind, helpless pile of iron. The Tiger cemented its legendary status in June 1944 in Normandy. On June 13th, SS tank ace Michael Wittmann and 5 Tigers set up an ambush in a forest near the town of Villers-Bocage. A British armored column from the 7th Armored Division was rolling through the town, expecting no resistance. Wittmann pulled out alone to intercept them. The next 15 minutes are burned into military history. Driving parallel to the column, Wittmann annihilated tanks, half-tracks, and transport trucks. He pushed straight into the town, picking off vehicles one by one. By the time his Tiger was finally disabled in a narrow street, Wittmann had destroyed 12 tanks, over a dozen transport vehicles, and several anti-tank guns. His crew simply abandoned the tank and walked back to their lines on foot. The British advance in that sector completely collapsed. 1 tank, 15 minutes, an entire division paralyzed. The next day, the Allies issued a strict new directive. Do not engage Tigers in direct combat. Flank them, retreat, or call in air support. The legend had defeated reality. But behind every Tiger's victory was a monstrous, insatiable appetite. It drank gasoline by the bucket. It could drive about 60 kilometers through mud, and then the tanks were bone dry, while the nearest fuel depot might be 100 kilometers behind the lines. Tiger crews lived by a grim rule. 1 hour of combat meant 10 hours of maintenance. Mechanics had to tune the engine by ear, because a single overlooked fault would turn an invincible tank into a stationary bunker in the middle of a battlefield. And if a Tiger broke down, evacuating it was a nightmare. You needed 2 other Tigers just to tow it, or 3 heavy recovery half-tracks, which were always in short supply. More often than not, crews were simply ordered to rig the tank with explosives, blow it up, and walk away. The vast majority of Tigers did not die in a blaze of glory in combat. They suffocated on the side of the road. Throughout the entire war, Germany built just over 1,300 Tigers. The Soviet Union built 50,000 T-34s. The math was simple and absolutely ruthless. 1 Tiger cost the equivalent of 4 assault guns, guzzled fuel at an impossible rate, demanded spare parts that didn't exist, and tied up mechanics that were desperately needed by hundreds of other tanks. The entire logistics network of the Wehrmacht tore itself apart trying to service these monsters. Meanwhile, behind the Ural Mountains, Soviet assembly lines were churning out simple, reliable tanks by the thousands every single month. According to German records, Tigers destroyed over 10,000 enemy tanks during the war, while losing fewer than 2,000 of their own, and that includes the ones destroyed by their own crews. The numbers look incredibly impressive, but they didn't change a thing. The Eastern Front stretched for 1,000 kilometers. Wherever a Tiger showed up, it dominated absolutely. But on 100 other sectors of the front, German tank crews were burning alive in their Panzer IVs, fighting against impossible odds. And the Allies quickly found answers. The British ramped up production of the Sherman Firefly with its deadly 17-pounder gun. The Soviets rolled out the heavy IS-2. The Americans perfected swarm tactics. Never duel. Encircle. Send 5 tanks against 1. Hit the flanks and rear where the armor is thinner. Sacrifice 2 or 3 tanks to kill the beast. Mathematics always defeats perfection. Today, only 9 Tigers survive in the world. One of them sits at the Tank Museum in Bovington, England. It was captured in Tunisia in the spring of 1943 after a lucky shell jammed its turret ring, forcing the crew to abandon it almost completely intact. It is the only Tiger in the world that can still drive under its own power. Every year, thousands of people travel to a museum festival just to watch the legend wake up. They come to hear the roar of that original Maybach engine, to feel the ground shake beneath its massive tracks, and to see with their own eyes the machine that once terrified entire armies. The legend has outlived the reality, and that perhaps is its only true victory. Because ultimately, this isn't a story about a tank. It's a story about the choice between genius and rationality. It's about how the blind pursuit of absolute perfection turns a triumph into a curse. German engineers built a machine capable of winning any one-on-one duel, but they built it for a war that didn't exist. A war of nightly jousts where technology decides everything. Real war turned out to be a war of logistics. It's about building 100 tanks instead of 10, getting them to the front, fueling them, patching them up, and throwing them back into the meat grinder. The Tiger won battles, but it lost the war. Its bottomless thirst for fuel and astronomical price tag slowly strangled its own army. Every Tiger built ate up resources that could have fielded 100 simpler machines. The Tiger became the ultimate metaphor for the Third Reich itself. Technologically flawless, terrifying to face, supremely confident in its own superiority, and ultimately doomed to suffocate under the crushing weight of its own ambition. Thank you all so much for watching. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next fascinating story. Catch you in the next one.